Welcome to episode 3 of Tiger Wolf for July 29th. Yeah, 29th.
Sorry.
Yeah. My name is Chris, Tiger.
My name is Nathan, the Wolf.
And here we go. So for this episode, we've decided to get into music. So today we're going to be talking about 2 eras of music. And we think it might end up going 2 parts. But we're going to talk about 2 years and decide which was a better year for music. And so we're going to go, 1967?
Yeah, in 1991, which I think works because we're both fans of classic rock. And as we will see, there was a lot going on then. In 1991, of course, I would say it will be a very formative musical year for us growing up.
Yes.
And we'll see that there was a lot going on in a lot of different ways, whether it was like the grunge rock side that maybe for me I was sort of just cutting my teeth on, or whether it was like that awesome early 90s dance stuff that was going on, of which there was plenty.
Of which I still listen to. And
then some stuff that was like transition. And I think some artists, if we look through the years, are on both lists. So yeah. So you're
talking Nirvana of the 60s versus
right.
Nirvana of the 90s?
Totally.
All right.
Yeah.
And the Strawberry Alarm Clock of the 90s, did you ever hear them? No, I'm totally joking.
Oh. Wouldn't that be Leonard Skinner?
Yeah, well, that was the 70s.
That's
but
true.
Yes, that is one of my favorite musical facts to bring up every once in a while, that Strawberry Alarm Clock actually becomes Leonard Skinner.
It's surprising every time I hear it.
Well, do you want to kick this off so I can take my turn on Romance of the Three Kingdoms for Super Nintendo?
Sure.
We're playing while we do. By the way, I saw that nobody has started a Twitch.tv channel for playing Romance of the Three Kingdoms 2 for Super Nintendo. So we should be the first, because I think that makes the most sense. And then people can watch us play the game live.
I think we would have at least half as many viewers as we have listeners.
Anyways, so what do you...
Well, I think...
this is a great game, Nathan.
It is a great game and a great podcast. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you for continuing to listen.
That's right. So, like I said earlier, I think that there's a lot that happened in 67 that appeals to what we like, and obviously a lot that happened in 91. I think what's kind of interesting, kind of looking at the releases of the years, is that there was just way more music released in 1991. So,
like look at the list of January. That's crazy.
From 1991. Why don't you read out some of the
significant ones? Well,
I can while you play if you want.
Yeah, go for it. I'm going to take my turn. So you're going to kick us off, 60s?
Yeah,
we can get through the 60s list pretty quick.
Oh, absolutely. And some of the stuff that's bigger. And some of it, I'll be honest, like, there's big names, but, like, for example, I'm actually not that familiar with the Rolling Stones discography. So Between the Buttons came out that year, and I don't actually really know how significant of a release that was. I mean, obviously by 67 in the UK, they were established, but honestly, I don't really know what's on that album or what's significant about that. So, personally, it doesn't ring a strong chord for me, but there's definitely lots of other stuff going on, and we can see that there's some Monkeys that was released. The Doors had their self-titled album.
The Doors,
yeah.
Which, by the way, you've seen the Jimmy Fallon impersonations.
Yes, actually.
Of the Doors doing Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, I haven't seen that exactly.
You haven't seen that one? Oh, you need to see it. Has he done other Doors ones? Because it's the only one I've seen.
I've seen him do his Jim Morrison impression before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one of him doing Reading Rainbow as Jim Morrison in the Doors is so good. So good.
I thought you were going to ask if I had seen the movie, and I actually have never seen the Doors movie.
Which one? The Doors movie
Val
with
Kilmer
Val Kilmer?
Yeah, which I know you're a fan of, or at least I think you are.
Yeah, it's really good. It's quite dark, but it's quite good. Did you see the documentary?
No.
The documentary is amazing.
Yeah.
The documentary, I think I probably like a little bit more. It's narrated by Mr. Johnny Depp.
Right.
Which is awesome. It's really, really good documentary. When we were strange, that one.
Right. So there's, I think what's interesting with going through the 60s is seeing some stuff that is rock that comes out, and some stuff that is kind of still a leftover from that kind of hippie-ish Flower Child era. Like, as we move on here, we can see like the Byrds and the Mamas and the Papas, and that stuff is still going on. Donovan.
I love Donovan.
I have a bit of a love-hate thing with Donovan. Like the stuff that I shouldn't say love-hate, but I find he can be quite cheesy sometimes.
Sorry.
I've never heard that Donovan song.
It's my favorite Donovan song. It came right after that, like, Where You Love Like Heaven.
Nice. But there's like really, like, I find the Trogs actually very interesting. Yeah, Jefferson Airplane, totally its own different thing. So there's just lots going on. Shirley Bassey has a very...
but Surrealistic Pillow. Yeah, see, those are some amazing albums. Okay, so I'm getting totally distracted from my turn.
Yeah, that's okay.
But Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow and Donovan Mellow Yellow both came out in like January of the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And Elvis's great How Great Thou Art, which is like his gospel album, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic gospel album.
I was going to be totally dismissive about it.
No way. It's good. It's totally good. He's the king for a reason.
Well,
all good.
I actually can get into Elvis Presley, even though, like, growing up, I was not a fan at all. But
he's kind of kitsch.
He is kitsch, but it's like his gospel stuff. I would say not. I can't get into.
Feel the love, Nate.
I mean, his early stuff just had great energy to it, but I would never.
Not the Sun Record stuff. Like, the Sun Record stuff is way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say, like, in March here, we're more kind of getting into stuff that I'm really into, like the Velvet Underground and Nico album. Is a fantastic album. I have that in vinyl. Yeah. And like the thing I love about that album and really all the Velvet Underground stuff is I feel like it could really come out at any time and it would just sound like them. Like it's not really of an era.
It's just cool music.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really good music. I mean, obviously you can tell that it set the table for so much stuff that came out, even 30 years later plus. But yeah, super good. So Cat Stevens had Matthew and Son come out, which is not like, I think, super, like, I don't know, one of the best remembered Cat Stevens albums, but...
Is it good? Like, I don't know my Cat Stevens super well.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's kind of one of those guys who I'll pick out songs more than albums, but...
Yeah, he's always been a greatest hits guy for me.
Yeah, but that album, to my memory, doesn't have, like, a whole bunch of songs that I'm really into. Maybe I'll have just a really quick look at it, or maybe not. Let's have a quick look at the track listing here, see if anything pops out at us. And not really.
Yeah, it wasn't really a standout one.
I
think notable on this list actually is, so Nate and I bonded early on, and I really at some point want to get into this story, but we bonded early on with making mixtapes of bad old records. And so one of the bad old records that we used to spin a lot of stuff from, particularly because, maybe it's not bad. It's really good, but is Tom Jones' Green Green Grass at Home, but particularly because we were obsessed with the song A Taste of Honey and having every different rendition of A Taste of Honey on our mixtapes, which is kind of our own running joke. Sort of like when you guys had all the different... What's the guy? Okay.
He did a lot of Hawaiian music, lounge music.
It wasn't James Last.
Conniff?
Ray Conniff.
Yeah,
so you had the wall of the Ray Conniff ladies album covers, like where it was like a close-up of a lady's face, but he had like 30 albums where every single album cover was a lady's face.
It was such a classic thing to go through record shops and see all of these records. And so many of the covers of these albums were exactly the same.
And you still see it today.
Oh, totally. And
because nobody wants those albums.
I know, exactly. But he somehow had, like, we had, I have to say, like 15 album covers that were almost virtually the same, just with a different girl on the cover. Never saw a picture of him anywhere.
Although, actually, no, I did have a good one that was like him with a few ladies, and it was like Ray Conniff's Awful Nice, and he's on the cover of that one.
He had a few where he kind of played on that title where it was like Ray Conniff and then this something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Clever.
Yes.
He finds something he likes and he keeps on going back to it.
He does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyways, I was going to say, it's worthwhile that in 1967...
Tom Jones. Special place.
The Welsh man who made ladies throw their underpants.
That's right. Are you a Grateful Dead fan at all?
Love my Grateful Dead.
Do you?
Yep. It's a self-titled Grateful Dead album came out that year.
So the soundtrack for Casino Royale came out that year, and...
Oh, so good.
I think I'm more interested to talk about the movie, really, in a way, because it is one of the most absurd, crazy movies ever, but it kind of gives a sense of the time that was like what was happening then, because it is such like a vestige of kind of that hippie era, like really trippy things are like. If you watch that, you understand where Austin Powers came out of.
Yeah,
like it's at the time like 3 or 4, maybe 5 James Bond movies that come out. There obviously was a big property at the time, and the only James Bond book that wasn't owned by the producers of the James Bond movies was Casino Royale. So someone kind of smelled the chance for an easy buck, and they bought the property for Casino Royale. Went to make the movie. They ended up making it cost more money than any of the Bond movies before that. And what they ended up with was this huge mess where, like, it was not nearly as good as the actual Bond movies. And like they had Peter Sellers in it. They had Orson Welles. They had like tons of big actors. And like Peter Sellers like walked out partway through, so the movie doesn't make any sense. Woody Allen is in it. It's like David Niven plays James Bond, Peter Sellers plays a different version of James Bond. Woody Allen plays Jimmy Bond. So you never really know exactly what's going on. Like Peter Sellers just really quickly all of a sudden gets captured and disappears from the movie, and it doesn't make any sense in the context of the movie. But in reality, he just walked away from the movie.
Yeah.
It's just like it just is the most absurd mess of a movie.
But how about the soundtrack though? It's Burt Bacharach.
Totally, I love Burt Bacharach, and I love that he again, like Austin Powers kind of brought him back into relevance a little bit in the late 90s, and he did that album with Elvis Costello that I actually really enjoyed. But I love Burt Bacharach. I had my Burt Bacharach Moog album. I had Burt Bacharach. I had a few Burt Bacharach. I still have them actually on vinyl. So yeah, love that Burt Bacharach stuff for sure.
There's some other really good stuff in this list for 67, like Country Joe and the Fish is a fantastic album. Electric Music for the Mind and Body, that was really good. The Electric Prunes, also very good. And also some really formative Willie Nelson stuff around that time.
Are the Electric Prunes the precursor of the Virgin Prunes?
No, I don't think they have anything to do with the Virgin Prunes. The Virgin Prunes are an acquired taste, I would say.
Yeah, difficultly so.
Yeah, well, if you're into that kind of post-punk era of 80s stuff, I suppose you could get into them. But
I saw the second Monkees release of the year in there.
There's a second Monkees album? Where's that?
That's in
May. Oh, wow, there. Already, the next month.
Very productive year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually that's one... you saw, what was that one? The documentary about the guy who played Davy Jones's extra... Mayor of the Sunset Strip.
Yeah, that's right.
About what's his name? Come on.
It's kind of sad.
Rodney Bingenheimer. Fantastic documentary.
Yeah, he's a radio DJ as well, right?
Yep.
And just sort of a guy who really had the smallest taste of fame you can possibly have, and really.
But lots of it.
I guess so. But I mean, it's.
But it seems like his life is just kind of carries on.
Yeah, that was the peak.
Usual.
35 years earlier, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's kind of sad that like nothing like at that level has happened really since then for the guy. But it's a really interesting documentary.
I hope that something after that helped him move on with his career. But should we talk about like some of the beginning like albums that came out at the beginning of the 90s here? Like, so maybe the first half, because we've kind of got to about May of 67.
Okay, I mean, I think we haven't really talked about who we consider the favorite and who is, who's the tiger and who's the wolf. And I mean, I think I have to say that like so far in the early 60s, there's no like mammoth albums that were on frequent play that were like, that is amazing, I know that there's definitely some to come, but
sort of closer to the last half. And I think that's probably the same for both, isn't it?
Yeah, the 90s ends very strong as well. So it is interesting. Both years, we can totally get into the 90s right now, but it's interesting that both years start just a little bit more slowly. I did just notice that Herb Alpert released an album in 67, which is pretty awesome, right at the same time as Engelbert Humperdinck.
So yeah, that was like the one I had. That one, Release Me. That's a classic.
Is it?
Oh yeah. But yeah, the Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass was another classic. So we used to make these mixtapes that we would take the label from Barks Root Beer, like bottles and cassettes and put them on our like mixtapes.
Johnny?
There are Barks tapes, and then we would take samples of the Barks commercials and record them, and then intersperse them in between all the crappy songs. We'd have Barks commercials playing over and over again, like the Johnny. What do you mean Barks has bite, Johnny? And so those were our root beer tapes, and so we would have a lot of Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass on those albums, especially from Whipped Cream and Other Delights.
Yeah, that was the main go-to, and that was our first taste of honey, as it were.
And I don't think, was that 67? No, I think that was 66. Yeah, it wasn't 67.
That was an album that was extremely easy to find. Like, it must have been a massive seller, because pretty much any record shop you go into, you see like 3 copies of it. I remember my grandparents had it, which was a bit shocking when you think of the cover of Whipped Cream and Other Delights, because it's a naked woman in a pile of whipped cream. Like,
it's saucy. You're like you're a teenage boy, and you find that album, you're like, oh dear.
Yeah.
1960s. What's going on?
I'm feeling new feelings.
Yep. Yeah. Well, what? So in the 60s, Dean Martin. Happiness is Dean Martin. Are You Experienced by the Jimi Hendrix Experience?
That's obviously like massive.
Yeah. So this is where it like really starts to pick up, right? So. I actually really do like Love and Spoonful for soundtrack for You're a Big Boy Now is really good. But here's David Bowie's self-titled debut.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of Bowie. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. Small Faces from the Beginning. What's another good one?
Should we spend a little time on Sgt. Pepper's? Because I mean, I think that probably.
Do we have to?
Are you not a fan?
It's way too much Paul McCartney for me. Like I love my Beatles, but it's a Paul album. It might as well be a Paul McCartney solo album. It has a couple moments on it that like break out of that. Like it has some really nice, charming George Harrison moments in it, and the Lennon moment of like a day in the life is amazing. But it's just so overplayed. Like I'd much rather listen to like Revolver, Rubber Soul, The White Album, like. A lot of the other albums I'd much rather listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironically, like, didn't Paul pick the majority of the people who were going to be on the cover?
Yep, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair, but I mean, I think, I just love the Beatles so much that they're going to be the peak of really any year they release something, for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't recall off the top of my head if they released anything else that year, because they definitely had some years in the mid-60s where they released a couple of things.
I feel like they also released...
We'll find out for sure pretty soon, but there's still plenty of really good songs on that album. I think that's maybe the first time... Or no, I guess it wouldn't be that album. I thought maybe that was the first time we heard Ringo sing on an album. But Octopus's Garden would be...
no, that's later. I kind of feel like Yellow Submarine might have been the same year.
Right. If it is that do you prefer Yellow Submarine to Sgt. Pepper's?
Oh, see, Strawberry Fields Forever. If that had been on the album, it would have made it a lot stronger for me. Because that was one of my favorites.
Was that released just as a single?
A single, yeah.
That's what's amazing about them. I mean, I feel like we could talk about the Beatles for a long time, but the fact that they had all these albums that were really strong, like I think even that one you'd have to say is probably one of the top ones of the year. And
oh yeah, like in terms of influence and everything, like Sgt. Pepper was one of those things that, you know, you had that really beautiful kind of call and response between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, where the Beach Boys did something and the Beatles felt like they had to respond. Yeah. And you know, you had that like Pet Sounds versus Sgt. Pepper kind of thing going on. And so we could probably do an episode on Pet Sounds versus Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
But you kind of have to be open to the Beach Boys to even be open to that conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Which some people aren't.
Well, and Sgt. Pepper's came right after, was it Revolver or Rubber Soul? Right? Like,
I feel like it was Revolver.
Like, but it was like a huge, really advance from there after Revolver.
Yeah, so Magical Mystery Tour came out the same year. Okay, so that was what I was thinking. So Magical Mystery Tour, I enjoy more, like Magical Mystery Tour, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, which was the B-side for Strawberry Fields. I kind of like better, and I think that's just because
Yeah.
they're a little bit more flawed.
Yeah.
I like flawed music.
Penny Lane's like one of my favorite Beatles songs.
Yeah, see, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields ended up on the Magical Mystery Tour soundtrack.
Yeah.
Right?
And because it's a soundtrack, I think it does feel kind of disjointed.
Yep. Yeah, it totally does.
But it's
pretty
also
flawed.
the whole, even the movie is really disjointed. So
The movie is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, the whole like John Lennon is shoveling spaghetti onto the fat woman's plate scene. You're like, what on earth are you guys doing? I am the walrus? Like, you guys are insane.
totally. But I mean, it has like, I mean, Blue Jay Way is a kind of a, I guess I'll say a sort of a sweet song.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic. Again, I love Penny Lane. All You Need Is Love is, of course, a classic. Had that not been released already?
Which, Penny Lane?
All You
Yeah.
Need Is Love?
Yeah, previously. They
Yeah.
just put it onto it was basically, they had it as a leftover and
Right.
just added it.
Yeah, but just, anyways, I mean, I don't want to talk just about the Beatles, but I mean, I think it's important because,
It definitely is a big vote in favor of 1967.
yeah, and we have to sort of
Like-
acknowledge what the heavy hitters are,
Mhm.
the ones that really carry the year.
Yeah, and so in terms of other big ones that came out that year, there were a couple big greatest hits that came out that year, like Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash both put out like both very, very solid greatest hits albums.
Yeah, well, and Bob Dylan's, I think, was really one that was for the fans because it's like his bootlegs, and he's just because of the following he has, there were fans that were always kind of clamoring for that bootleg stuff that he did.
Mhm.
I can't say that I'm like a massive Bob Dylan fan, but you know, that is obviously a very significant release.
Mhm.
The Grassroots is on there. I actually quite like the Grassroots.
There's a lot of good stuff. Like, look at this. Like, the Canned Heat self-titled album, the Vanilla Fudge self-titled album. I don't like it, but the first Bee Gees album came out that year. Little Games by the Yardbirds, another very good one.
Mm-hmm.
Pink Floyd, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, came
Yeah.
out in 1967, like, which is a crazy Syd Barrett, amazing era Pink Floyd. Yeah, so you got the
That's
old
it.
Little Stevie Wonder, the self-titled Big Brother and the Holding Company, so Janis Joplin.
Yeah,
like
it is
Frank
interesting to
Zappa's
see
Lumpy Gravy.
to see what was going on because, like, when you look at Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross, you know, there's like sort of Motown still happening, but you look at Yardbirds and Pink Floyd and where they're at, and you know that, you know, Led Zeppelin's around the corner and Pink Floyd's about to hit like a totally different kind of sound. And
yeah, and Yardbirds, a precursor to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah,
so
and the
lots
Beatles-
of that new kind of 70s rock thing coming in.
Yeah.
At the beginning of it, the beginning tastes.
yeah, and the Beatles have really just changed their sound again. So, yeah, I think the year should deserve credit for all that's going on. Obviously, the Jimi Hendrix is obviously really driving the rock revolution that's about to come.
Yeah, there's lots. Like,
Like that Kinks Neil Diamond back combo there.
yep, and September 15th comes the Something Else by the Kinks, and then a day later you've got Scott Walker's first, I think that's his first
Oh.
album, Scott, when he was just a young lad.
I don't actually know his albums. I just know a couple of the songs.
Yeah, he's a funny one because he went crazy dark. So like
Right.
when he came back and was not a child actor, he came back as this, or like a child star. Came back as a very, very kind of sinister musician, like very kind of noise, would hang out with all the Sonic Youths of the world.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that he brought out his album here. Smiley Smile by the Beach Boys was when they were trying to do Good Vibrations.
Right.
And that's where that was like the sessions for what was going to be like their big, like the big Beach Boys album that they never really pulled off. Smile, right? So Smiley Smile was kind of like, let's try and save Smile and put out something.
And when they did Pet Sounds, I mean, that kind of was their answer to Sgt. Pepper's, right? Like
No, I think it was prior to, because it was 66, right?
Pet Sounds? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I seem to remember that there was a Beatles album that had happened that really inspired him to go and do Pet Sounds, because that was quite a departure for them at the time.
Yeah, Pet Sounds was 66.
Okay.
And that's where you have the kind of call and response. Like they reacted to Sgt. Pepper by going out to try and do this stuff of like Good Vibrations and Smile Smile. But like this was more of a response. Like Pet Sounds was more responding to like your Revolver and Rubber Soul, like the pairing of those two
Right.
albums, especially Revolver, which was was still probably my favorite Beatles album, just because you've got stuff like Tomorrow Never Knows, which is just crazy ahead of its time and basically invented the sound of the Chemical Brothers
Right. Yeah.
back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that. There's a lot of big albums. Like in 67, man, like, whew, man. Procol Harum's self-titled one, Captain Beefheart's Safe as Milk.
I've never actually listened to
It's
any Captain
It's
Beefheart.
a very wacky album, as any Captain Beefheart. I actually had that one 8-track.
Did you? Nice.
Yeah. But other awesome stuff. Bonzo Dog Doodah Band's Gorilla is a fantastic album. That's the guy. What's his name? Neil. Is it Neil Hines? The guy who ended up going on to. Was it Innes? Innes. Yeah, I can never pronounce his name right. But who worked with Eric Idle and did the Ruddles in the 70s.
Oh, right. Did you ever watch the Ruddles too?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Don't bother.
It
if you
was
haven't.
not very good.
No. Ruddles is great.
But yeah, there's some big ones, like...
there's the third Monkees album of the year.
Well, yeah, the Monkees.
But we do have, towards the end of the year, we do have Beatles coming out with Magical Mystery Tour. It's amazing how prolific a lot of these bands were. Like, Stevie Wonder had a second album. Jefferson Airplane have their second album at this point. I mean, and again, we're seeing that variety of where people like Ella Fitzgerald are just doing stuff.
And Axis Bold as Love by Jimi Hendrix Experience also came out in the UK in December.
Yeah.
And then a big Rolling Stones album, their Satanic Majesty's Request, which is a huge one.
Yeah.
Who Sell Out, fantastic. And also notable is 13th Floor Elevators, which
I've never heard of them.
Like. They're fantastic. Rocky Erickson. There's a really good documentary about Rocky Erickson. It's totally worth watching. It's a little bit heartbreaking. It's sort of in the vein of Daniel Johnston. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's sort of kind of got that, like, it's kind of a sad story, but it's really beautifully done. Definitely worth watching. And Songs of Leonard Cohen. Like, oh my goodness.
Is that...
Wow, that's a big year for music. 67.
Totally.
Okay, well...
I mean, I do love, like, that... So, I mean, for me, if I look at it, those Beatles albums and that Who album, the Who Sell Out, are probably the ones I've listened to the most.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are there any other... Like, it's amazing how prolific these guys are. Tom Jones has 2 albums. Donovan has 2 albums. I think that might be the second Dusty Springfield album we've seen. Like, there's just
a couple Donovans, yeah.
Yeah, a couple Jimi Hendrixes. Like, it's amazing how prolific they are. And, like, nowadays, like, a band might come out with an album every 3 or 4 years sometimes.
Yeah, I think it depends, though. In, like, the indie movement, you've got a lot more... people are putting out more material, I think.
But do you think as frequently and as strong as what we were saying
Not
here?
necessarily as strong, I don't think, yeah.
I mean, like, U2 puts out 2 albums a decade at this point.
And that's perfectly okay for some people.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, Bono's personality gets in the way for a lot of people, so...
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I know a lot of U2 haters out there.
It's true. But they'll be coming up when we talk about 1991.
Yeah, 1991. I think one
we'll...
thing I want to say as a parting shot that I didn't mention actually in this list is Love's Forever Changes also came out in 1967. So it's a very, very, very good album from 67.
Who did that?
Love.
Oh.
If you haven't heard Love's Forever Changes, you definitely need to hear it. It's a fantastic album.
Cool.
But yeah, again, like this is the kind of thing that in Canada we're a bit sheltered. We didn't necessarily have the same exposure to some of that stuff. Like Love Forever Changes is probably a bigger album, even though it's a U.S. band. Like, well, it's probably bigger in the UK.
And also, we weren't born when this stuff came out, so I mean, we had to kind of go seek all of it out after the fact. And I mean, maybe that works, and that stuff that wasn't as good is filtered out. But like when we're looking at this listing, like the majority of albums that came out that year, and I would say that like more than half are well-remembered, strong albums. Yeah, so it's I think that percentage-wise, I can't imagine 1991 holding up as well, but I think where 1991 might edge it is their strongest albums, just because there are so many, and there are some really amazing game changers even.
So do you want to cut this into 2 parts, or do you want to try and like do a marathon and now talk about the 90s?
No, I think let's save 1991 for next week in August.
Yeah. All right.
And and we'll talk about it then. And at that point, we can decide. Totally would love hearing what people are anticipating that they think will be more relevant to them. But
and tell us if there's something that we missed that we're like, dude, looking down the list, you guys didn't even talk about how amazing this
Country
was.
Joe and the Fish were.
Country Joe and the Fish are fantastic.
I do not know who they are. But yeah, are there any kind of clear takeaways from you looking at this list? I didn't even notice that Cream was on there.
Sly and the Family Stone, Cream, like this, yeah.
That's amazing.
Basically, I could spend an hour just looking at 1967.
Yeah,
so
that's
this
true.
is a fairly ambitious next topic for us.
Yeah, I feel. I mean,
But there's at least there's lots to talk about.
That's the downside in a way. Is just that I feel like we only kind of scratched the surface of what the year is. But I mean, there is so much there. But it's really impressive. I'm impressed by the amount of quality and how few albums there are and the diversity of it, and just being able to see kind of. I feel like it's a bit of a pivot point for music, because things are going to change a lot in the years coming up. So, but on that note, yeah, let's call it a show, and we'll pick up on 1991
next episode.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see you guys next week on Tiger Wolf for part 2 of 1967 in music versus 1991 in music. So next week we're going to talk about 1991. We'll see you there. Bye.
Ciao.